Greetings, my dear viewer. You're on the channel The Price of Cheating. The channel is for those who appreciate traditional family values and condemn adultery. So be sure to subscribe to the channel. Let's get started. The first 4 years of my marriage felt like a dream, full of laughter, love, and the excitement of building a life together. The next 8 years were quite decent, a steady rhythm of everyday life, but the last 18 plunged us into a deep abyss of suffering. I had no clear reason to endure it. Perhaps it was a glimmer of hope that things would improve, or maybe I was just too exhausted to change the course of my life. Anna and I got married right after graduating from university, filled with youthful optimism. I laid bricks and she waited tables, and for the first couple of years, we thrived, or at least it seemed that way. But then, like a thief in the night, everything changed, and I had no idea what storm was brewing beneath the surface. Yes, I knew Anna was pregnant, and naturally I assumed the child was mine. Only 12 years after Liza's birth did the truth hit me like a freight train. My daughter was not biologically mine. As Liza grew, the cracks in my relationship with Anna widened, but it wasn't a sudden break. It was a slow, painful erosion. When Liza was born, Anna stepped back from work, and I managed to provide us with a comfortable, though unremarkable, life. I didn't immediately realize that Anna and Liza always had wardrobes sparkling with the latest trends. Anna was careful with our finances, never spending extra on herself, yet somehow they were always impeccably dressed. I noticed this but never confronted her about it. In the early years of Liza's life, everything seemed fine, but when she entered her teenage years, a storm cloud of moodiness hovered over her. I shared my concerns with Anna, but she brushed them off, leaving me with a gnawing feeling. That's when it dawned on me. Liza was becoming a reflection of her mother, and our once vibrant relationship was slipping through my fingers like sand. Our intimacy had become a distant memory. I no longer took the initiative. I just responded to her actions. It felt like I was grasping at shadows, cold and distant. My focus shifted to saving money for a house, but as that goal drew closer, my desire diminished. I hid my savings in a secure place, constantly adding to them. As Liza's 12th birthday approached, I finished work early, deciding to find the perfect gift. Walking through an unfamiliar business district, I noticed a small urban park across the street. There, on a bench, sat Anna with an older man in a suit. Liza was beaming between them, her laughter sounding like music. At that moment, the pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place. I slipped into a nearby cafe and settled by the window, unable to take my eyes off them. For almost an hour, I watched them share stories and laugh. It felt like a lifetime since I had been with them. Eventually, they stood up and embraced each other warmly. The stranger leaned in and gently kissed Anna on the cheek, then waved goodbye and crossed the street. My curiosity was piqued, and I discreetly followed him until he entered a building. Brian Lee, a financial director with a large office on the 3rd floor. This was the revelation I needed. I used to go out of my way to be a considerate partner, even surprising Anna with flowers and small tokens of affection from time to time. But that all changed. A thick veil of indifference settled over me. I concocted a story about back problems that kept me from sleeping at night, just enough to justify moving into the spare room with a new mattress. Now the distance was not only physical, but also emotional. It was Liza's birthday, and I missed it without giving her a gift. Strangely, she didn't seem bothered by it. She never brought it up. Meanwhile, my workdays grew longer and longer. I left home before dawn and returned after dinner, and my absence became a routine. Anna mentioned my long hours a few times, but eventually stopped. Life in our house continued. Anna and Liza adjusted their days to fit my schedule. It was an unspoken agreement, a silent acceptance of my absence. Anna took on the role of caretaker, doing my laundry and keeping my room in order. On weekends, I handled the yard and all the chores that needed attention. Bills were paid on time, and it seemed that in my absence, they were thriving. With the extra hours at work, my savings steadily grew. During our weekend dinners, the atmosphere was heavy and muted. Anna and Liza exchanged glances, but the silence was palpable, as if we were all actors in a play no one wanted to acknowledge. This quiet suffering stretched out for 18 long years. I had no idea when or how Anna and Liza reconnected with Brian, and frankly, I didn't care. It seemed insignificant in the grand scheme of things. And then, one fateful night, everything changed. I came home late from work to find Anna and Liza sitting together, tears streaming down their faces. I walked to the kitchen to grab a beer, and the weight of the moment descended on me like a dark cloud, after which I retreated to my room, feeling a sense of foreboding I couldn't shake. The kitchen table was covered with a local newspaper, its pages crumpled and worn, with the classifieds open like a forgotten book. Something about it caught my eye, and I picked up the newspaper to take a closer look. And there it was, a name that sent a chill down my spine. Brian Lee, listed among the obituaries. The revelation struck me like lightning. Brian had no living relatives. His funeral was handled by a special organization, and his estate was managed by a rather unremarkable firm. It was a strange twist of fate, considering my history with Nicholas Johnson, my schoolmate who took a different path from me. He went to university, while I found my calling as a stonemason. He was a decent lawyer, and I was a master with brick and mortar. Despite the years and the divergent paths, we remained friends. But as time went on, I felt an acute need that I couldn't ignore. I couldn't shake this nagging feeling. I explained the entire situation to Nicholas, the whole tangled mess. I had no solid proof that Brian was Liza's father, but sometimes gut feelings drive us to act. Given that Brian's estate might be hanging by a thread and no close relatives were claiming it, I was convinced that he must have left his fortune to someone. Nicholas, ever the opportunist, saw this as an intriguing project. We decided to pursue child support, even though Liza was already 28, because he was her father and had not provided for her all these years. To keep our story plausible, we settled on the figure of $2 million. It was still speculative, but with hope and desperation, we filed a claim against the estate for an astonishing sum. The game was on, and I could feel the stakes rising. I didn't mean to come across as greedy, I just craved my share of the pie. Nicholas, as always, offered to help me with the divorce, but I flatly refused. As for Brian, he was cremated. What happened to his ashes remains a mystery to me. 2 months later, Anna received an unexpected letter informing her of the reading of Brian Lee's will. I stumbled upon the letter hidden in her nightstand. It wasn't addressed to me. Instead, it was meant for Nicholas. The will was to be read by Charlie Wilson, with Anna Smith, her daughter Liza, and Nicholas Johnson, the lawyer representing my interests, all in attendance. Anticipation hung in the air, and I couldn't shake the feeling that secrets were about to be revealed. Nicholas recalled the moment when Anna and Liza's jaws dropped in astonishment as I was awarded the entire sum I had requested. Each of them received $20,000, the last remnants of the inheritance after I had taken my share. When the will was finally read, the terms were crystal clear. Brian bequeathed all of his estate in equal parts to Anna and his biological daughter. The clarity of this statement was undeniable proof of paternity. To my surprise, there were no objections. I didn't dissolve my 30-year marriage to Anna, but I decided to start fresh in Texas. I bought myself a new shiny pickup truck and set aside a modest sum of money for a rainy day. I quickly connected with local contractors, who were more than willing to welcome me into their ranks on a part-time basis. Now, with a new outlook on life and new opportunities on the horizon, I feel ready for the future. This concludes the story. If you like it, then put your powerful like and subscribe to the channel. Greetings, my dear viewer. You're on the channel The Price of Cheating. The channel is for those who appreciate traditional family values and condemn adultery. So be sure to subscribe to the channel. Let's get started. I've ended up caught in a web of uncertainty, still reeling from that mysterious letter. It's not that I hadn't noticed changes in my wife over the past month, but they were there. Barbara, usually full of energy and passion, had become increasingly moody and withdrawn. At first, I chalked it up to the stress of her job after a recent promotion. Whenever I tried to bring it up, she brushed me off, and to be honest, I was preoccupied with my own issues. Recently, I signed a promising new contract that I believed could take my career to new heights. But then, that letter appeared in my mailbox, unraveling the tangled threads of my concerns. It didn't just reveal a troubling situation. It pointed directly to the source of my unease. I knew I had to act quickly. I couldn't shake the feeling that time was slipping away. Finally, it dawned on me why Barbara had been so silent through all of this. The name that haunted my thoughts was Harry Clark, a senior manager at the company where Barbara worked. It didn't take long to connect the dots. He was her new boss. A striking figure, 6 feet tall, he towered over my petite wife, and over me for that matter. Not that I was a giant myself, but I wasn't the type to back down easily. The letter served as a stern warning against confronting Barbara directly with the disturbing evidence I had received. A line had been crossed, and I needed to tread carefully. Barbara had an upcoming formal event, and I had already told her I couldn't take time off to join her. But that was then, and now I had made up my mind. I would go to that event. I would keep my eyes wide open, determined to find out if there was any truth to the unsettling connection between my wife and Clark. If things went wrong, it could lead to serious consequences. Yes, that's exactly what I was hinting at. But who had sent that mysterious letter? Suddenly, I made a bold declaration. Tomorrow, I'm going to the corporate event. Barbara responded too quickly. You don't have to, Adam. You've got more important things to deal with right now. There's nothing more important to me than my wife, I countered, my tone firm. Adam, it's not exactly a dance, she said, her voice tinged with unease. You'll probably be bored to tears. Are spouses allowed? I asked, already anticipating her answer. You know they are, she reluctantly agreed, and many of them will be there. I suppose so, she admitted, her hesitation clear. Honestly, it's not really your crowd. Are you uncomfortable with me being there, Barbara? I asked, a knot forming in my stomach. Of course not, Adam. Her eyes glistened with unshed tears, and it pierced my heart. Well, then I'm going, I declared, making up my mind. End of discussion. I might not have had the prestigious education or high-level training that many of the men at that gathering could boast of, but I had done my best. My hair was neatly combed, and I wore a well-fitted suit. In fact, I had several, each one sharper than the last. Of course, I would never wear it to work. My job involves getting my hands dirty, and formal clothes aren't exactly suited for that. Work had worn me out, so I decided to take a couple of days off to recharge. My boss wasn't thrilled with my decision, but after I laid out my reasons, he eventually agreed. Though not without a fight, he urged me to reconsider and issued a few stern warnings, as if I were the type to dive headfirst into trouble. In the end, Barbara and I got ready for the evening, and I felt sharper than usual, while Barbara looked absolutely stunning. She stood barely 5 feet tall, but she had charisma and charm in abundance. We had met at the gym years ago, and it was clear she had maintained her fitness over the years. The black dress Barbara wore hugged her curves perfectly, and the high heels made her almost as tall as I was. As the evening unfolded, I quickly realized who Clark was. I was struck by how Barbara deliberately avoided being alone with him, and I couldn't help but wonder if I was the only one who noticed. Perhaps I was, but if not for that letter, I likely wouldn't have picked up on the tension. I tried to stay in the background, letting her mingle and introduce herself, engaging in the usual small talk that seemed to be the norm that evening. Just when I started to think I was wasting my time, fate threw me a curveball. Suddenly, they were alone together on the bustling dance floor. He had that unmistakable look of a cat that had just caught the canary, with smug satisfaction written all over his face. Meanwhile, Barbara seemed caught in a web of awkwardness, her eyes darting around as if searching for me, her silent observer. And I watched, though I wasn't thrilled with the scene unfolding before me. The way his hands moved closer to her made my stomach churn. I didn't like it one bit, but I had to act cautiously. Patience was my ally, and it seemed that my moment was just on the horizon. Hello, I began, finally catching his eye. Harry Clark, right? He responded with a hint of caution. That's right. I'm sorry, but you look familiar. I can't quite place you. I'm from the West Office, I said, leveraging the only connection I had to my advantage. A wave of relief washed over me. My decision to keep my distance from Barbara had paid off. Ah, he exclaimed, extending his hand. You must be Perez, the new head of transitional acquisitions. Yes, that's correct, I said, though I had no idea what that title entailed, and I resisted the urge to grip his hand too tightly as I shook it. I don't know many people here yet, he continued, a smirk playing on his lips. But I saw you dancing with that lovely blonde. Is she your wife? You mean Barbara Smith? I replied, forcing a smile. He smirked knowingly, and I sensed that this wasn't just casual conversation. Not my wife, he clarified, but we're getting to know each other. That's how it all starts, lucky guy, I grinned, playfully nudging him. She's amazing, breathtaking, really. And those curves? Wow. He grinned slyly and winked back at me. So have you touched them? I asked, my heart racing as I awaited his response. This was the moment I had been waiting for, the confirmation I so desperately craved. For a brief second I thought he might dodge the question, but then I saw the gears turning in his head. Yes, he confessed with an exaggerated sigh, clearly pleased with himself. She's been entertaining me in my office. For a month now, he added, and she's been bending over my desk, practically begging for it. You're playing a dangerous game, I spat out, my anger barely contained. Does she have a husband? Yes, he nodded solemnly. She's got a husband, some pathetic loser, completely unqualified. I have no idea why she's still with him. What does he even do for a living? I asked him with a playful grin, eager to dig deeper into the situation. What's his name? He shrugged, confusion clouding his face. I have no idea, he admitted. From what I gathered, he didn't even have a steady job. It seems like he spent half his time at home, living off his wife's income. Tell me his name, I repeated, savoring the fact that my wife hadn't even come close to breaking our vows. I think she calls him Adam, he grumbled, irritation creeping into his voice. Adam Smith, probably. At that point, I couldn't resist correcting him. Actually, it's Adam Perez. Smith is her maiden name, which she uses for work. Why would she do that? He asked, still not grasping the trouble he was in. We agreed on it, I replied, letting my words sink in. What do you mean you? He began, his voice trailing off in shock. I mean her husband, I calmly stated, watching his expression change. Understanding dawned on him and he laughed, finally connecting the dots. Here to beg me to please her? I'm here to teach you a lesson in manners, I sighed, trying to keep my composure. A runt like you? He sneered, clearly underestimating me. He was 5 or 6 inches taller and probably twice my weight. And then, in a moment of desperation, I did something truly provocative. I wanted to provoke a reaction that would go unnoticed by the casual observers around us, so I spat at him. You little bastard! He roared, finally taking the bait and lunging at me. Maybe he recognized me as Barbara's husband, but thankfully he didn't dig deeper. He swung at me, and while I dodged the blow, I allowed him to land a hit, jerking back sharply as if struck hard. Though you doubt my abilities, let me assure you that my so-called part-time job gave me more than just a paycheck. I'm going to lay you out, he yelled, flailing his arms like a windmill in a storm as he chased after me. Clearly, he thought he could knock me out while I reminded myself to stay calm and not resort to using my fists. Smirking, I realized that any observer would see who started the fight, and I was ready to deliver the promised lesson. Dodging his wild swings felt like child's play. Finally, when I struck back, my slap landed on him with such force that he staggered back, momentarily stunned. You fight like a woman, he sneered and lunged at me again. Big mistake. 6 swift slaps later, he was sprawled on the ground, and I stood over him, adrenaline coursing through my veins, a sense of satisfaction settling in my soul. For God's sake, Adam, what have you done? My wife Barbara exclaimed, rushing to pull me away from him. You shouldn't have gone this far, Adam, she scolded, concern etched on her face. You shouldn't have slept with him. You destroyed 30 years of marriage, I replied with hatred. You've deeply hurt me, and now you'll regret it. No, Adam, you've got it all wrong. During my conversation with Harry, I had turned on a voice recorder, and it was evidence of her infidelity. Approaching the microphone, I played the recording of the conversation. Everyone around turned to look at me, clearly surprised by what they heard. Some whispered, some smirked. The recording ended, and I walked out of the building, marking the end of my marriage. Soon after, Barbara and her lover were fired. The CEO was at the event and witnessed everything. The next day, I filed for divorce, using our prenuptial agreement, and Barbara left our marriage with $20,000, and I began to move on. This concludes the story. If you like it, then put your powerful like and subscribe to the channel. Greetings, my dear viewer. You're on the channel The Price of Cheating. The channel is for those who appreciate traditional family values and condemn adultery. So be sure to subscribe to the channel. Let's get started. In the sunlit enclosure of the conservatory, Michael stood frozen, his eyes locked on Rebecca, his wife of 40 years. The warmth flooding the glass-walled space sharply contrasted the cold unease between them. Michael, I've decided to accept David's invitation to stay with him tonight. I hope you can understand, Rebecca said, her voice steady but resolute. Michael's response dripped with venomous sarcasm. So, you're actually going to spend the night with your lover? Rebecca, well-versed in handling his temper, maintained her calm. David isn't my lover, Michael. He's someone I share a deep connection with. We have mutual interests, and I cherish his company. I don't know where this will lead, but walking away from him now feels wrong. I'm asking you to see it for what it truly is. Her voice softened as she added, This doesn't change the fact that I care deeply for you, but David has become a significant presence in my life. Michael's expression twisted in disgust. I can just imagine what Louise would say about you turning me into a pitiful cuckold, he spat. Rebecca's composure wavered, and she stomped her foot, her frustration surfacing. You are not a cuckold, she snapped, her voice sharp with indignation. Michael shot back, his tone cutting. Isn't that exactly what I am? A cuckold is a man whose wife takes other lovers, and that's what you've made me. Rebecca steadied herself, her tone softening again. That's not true, Michael. I don't have lovers, at least not in the way you're imagining. There's only David. And as for Louise, it's unfair to bring her into this. I was there for her when she needed support, just as she would have been for you had I left. Michael's expression hardened with disbelief. I'm sure Louise would have leapt at the chance to be the other woman for me, he said dryly. Without warning, Rebecca's hand connected with his cheek in a sharp slap that left him momentarily stunned. He staggered back, his voice dropping to a steady but firm tone. Violence won't solve this. Her lips quivered, the hint of an apology lingering unspoken. Instead, she answered with defiance. I'm not some immoral woman. Yes, I'm going to be with David, perhaps even share a bed with him, but whatever happens doesn't erase the life we've built together. Her words carried a playful irony, masking the tension beneath. Michael said nothing, recognizing the futility of further argument. His thoughts spiraled, haunted by the notion that Rebecca might experience emotions with David she had never shared with him. The word harlot danced unspoken in his mind. Rebecca's voice broke through his brooding. Please, take your medicine while I'm gone. Will you promise me that? Michael's voice was laced with disbelief. Why would you care if I do? Wouldn't my death make things simpler for you and David? Rebecca shook her head firmly. No, Michael, that's not what I want. I care for you deeply and don't want to see you unwell. You need your medication for your heart, your blood pressure. We're not young anymore. You're 71 and I'm 67. We both need to look after ourselves. She leaned in and kissed his cheek gently, a farewell imbued with bittersweet affection. Moments later, the purr of her sports car's engine signaled her departure, and she disappeared into the night, heading toward David's house 60 miles away. Though not far by many standards, the distance marked a significant boundary between them. As Rebecca navigated the winding roads, memories from 16 years earlier surfaced. She recalled the tragic accident that claimed her sister Louise's life, a workplace mishap that left David, her husband, a young widower. Rebecca had stepped in during his grief, offering solace that gradually deepened into something more. The moment their dynamic shifted was elusive, but one explosive confrontation with Michael had cemented it. When Michael uncovered the truth, his rage erupted like a volcano. The argument was raw and fierce, accusations and heartbreak flying unchecked. It ended abruptly when Michael collapsed, clutching his chest. That terrifying moment revealed the heart condition that would shape their lives going forward. Rebecca had called for an ambulance in a panic, the scene etched in her memory. David standing in his underwear, Michael writhing on the floor, and herself caught in the storm. The paramedics arrived swiftly, their calm professionalism a stark contrast to the chaos. Michael was stabilized and rushed to the hospital, where a life-saving stent was inserted. Despite everything, David chose not to press charges against Michael, an act of forgiveness that left lasting scars on all involved. Though Michael's body recovered, his emotional wounds lingered, festering with time. Rebecca, however, continued her clandestine visits to David, justifying them as acts of compassion. As the years passed, Michael's suspicions grew. Now, 16 years later, Michael sat alone in the conservatory as Rebecca drove off to another meeting with David. Surrounded by lush greenery and bathed in sunlight, he wrestled with the fractured state of their marriage. Though his health had deteriorated further, he concealed the extent of it, unwilling to let Rebecca think he was using it to manipulate her. As the June sun climbed higher, the conservatory grew unbearably hot. Michael, seated in his usual chair, drifted into a restless sleep. In his dreams he wandered a vast, endless desert, the scorching sands stretching infinitely. But the dream was short-lived. He awoke suddenly, the oppressive heat pressing down on him like a weight. Struggling to stand, he was overcome by dizziness and collapsed onto the cool tiled floor. The relief he expected from the stone never came. Instead, the heat seemed to radiate upward, smothering him in an unyielding embrace. He crawled toward the double doors leading into the living room, each movement sapping what little strength he had left. Rebecca had given him a Bluetooth pendant for Christmas, a device meant to keep him tethered to her phone. But now, in his most desperate moment, it mocked him with its silence as his calls went unanswered, diverted straight to voicemail. "Help!" he croaked, his voice barely more than a whisper. His jacket with the phone inside lay cruelly just outside the living room, a lifeline he could not grasp. Driven by sheer will, he inched closer to the doors, clinging to a fragile hope. Out of the corner of his eye, a flicker of motion drew his attention. He turned his head and saw a familiar figure in the conservatory, Louise, his sister-in-law, her face a mixture of warmth and concern. "Louise?" he murmured, a glimmer of hope breaking through his pain. "It's me," she said softly, her voice steady and kind. Her eyes, bright with emotion, held a mixture of compassion and urgency. "What's going on? Why are you here?" "I came for you, dear brother-in-law," she replied with a gentle smile. "Come now, get up." She always called him Mikey, a nickname infused with a casual affection that felt grounding in that surreal moment. She extended her arms toward him, beckoning him to rise, but as he struggled to lift himself, a chilling realization dawned on him. His body lay motionless on the conservatory floor. The shocking truth struck him like a lightning bolt. "I'm dead, aren't I?" The thought echoed in his mind as he recoiled from her outstretched hands. Louise's solemn nod confirmed his fears. "Yes," she said gently. "You've crossed the threshold. It's time to come with me." Her expression softened as she continued. "I've been granted special permission to guide you to the other side. I'm so sorry for what Rebecca and David did to you. You deserved so much more." Her tone carried both sorrow and warmth. "You were right all along. I would never have betrayed your trust the way Rebecca did. Not because I didn't see your worth, but because loyalty matters more than fleeting temptation. Let's be honest, Mikey. I'm not your wife." Her teasing smile briefly lifted the somber mood. Taking his hand, she led him away, toward a realm far removed from earthly anguish, a place of serenity and wonder. Meanwhile, back on Earth, Rebecca was driving home 2 days later, a gnawing unease tightening her chest. Guilt and regret churned in her mind, driving her to consider ways to repair the damage she'd caused. The affair with David had shattered Michael, and the weight of her actions pressed heavily on her. "How can I fix this?" she wondered. She ran through scenarios, cooking his favorite meal, preparing a relaxing bath, dedicating an entire day to his happiness. Her pulse quickened at the thought of making amends, But was it too late to bridge the chasm between them? The memory of the slap she'd delivered lingered, a sharp reminder of her cruelty. She'd heard stories of women leaving abusive partners without hesitation, yet Michael had stayed, enduring her betrayals. A part of her clung to the hope that he'd forgive her. But wasn't it time to confront the double standard she'd created? As she approached the house, an ominous thought struck her. She'd left her phone off. Turning it on, her heart sank at the sight of a message from Michael. "Please help me." Panic surged and she floored the gas pedal, desperation mixing with guilt in her veins. When she arrived, his car was parked outside, and a fresh wave of dread washed over her. She burst through the front door, calling his name, her voice trembling. The living room was eerily quiet. Her eyes drifted to the conservatory doors, and what she saw beyond them made her blood run cold. Michael's lifeless body lay sprawled on the cold tiles, his arms stretched toward the door as if reaching for salvation. The sight stole the breath from her lungs. 3 days of heat and confinement had left his body grotesquely altered, a grim testament to his final struggle. Her shaking hands fumbled for her phone as she dialed emergency services. When responders arrived, their professional detachment contrasted starkly with the horror of the scene. One offered her the contact of a discreet cleanup service. "They're excellent," he said. "Mention Ron from the coroner's office and ask for Andy. They'll handle everything." Rebecca closed the conservatory doors, retreating to the kitchen with a bottle of gin in hand. Her fingers trembled as she dialed David's number. He answered cautiously. "Hello?" "David, it's Rebecca," she began, her voice shaking. "Michael, he's gone. He had a heart attack." Before David could respond, another voice interrupted, sharp and accusatory. "David, are you talking to that woman who let her husband be humiliated? Hang up now! You're supposed to be with me, not wasting time on her." Rebecca's temper flared. "David," she snapped, "I thought we had something real. I almost left Michael for you. How naive I was to believe I meant more than just another conquest. And tell that screeching harpy to mind her own business." Without waiting for a reply, she ended the call and blocked his number. It felt like a hollow victory. "I'm sorry, Michael," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "For everything, for hurting you, betraying you, all of it." Her sobs came in waves, mourning her husband, her late sister, and the selfishness that had wrought such devastation. In the end, she realized, it was her own choices that had led to this chaos. Now, all that remained was the wreckage of a life she could never piece back together. This concludes the story. If you like it, then put your powerful like and subscribe to the channel. What if the person you trusted more than life itself turned out to be the most ruthless betrayer? Have you ever loved someone so much that you were ready to do anything for them? Ready to turn a blind eye to the pain, to the growing coldness in your relationship, just to bring back those warm moments that once felt eternal? Imagine coming home, cooking dinner to revive a love that's slowly dying, and then accidentally hearing a truth that shatters you from the inside out. Cheating, lies, and the ultimate devotion, thrown away like it meant nothing. But you know what? This story isn't just about betrayal. It's about the strength that awakens when your heart is broken. About revenge that will be as cold as ice. Hello, my friend. I'm so glad you stopped by my channel. If it's your first time here, don't forget to subscribe and like this video, as every like truly inspires me. Please tell me which city and country you watched this video from. Now, let's get started. There was a time when Aurora and I were utterly inseparable. Ours wasn't just any relationship. It was the kind people admired from a distance, the kind that felt like it was ripped straight from a novel. We could lose ourselves in endless conversations about nothing in particular, yet it always felt like we were sharing the deepest parts of ourselves. We had inside jokes that no one else could understand, as though we existed in a world made just for the two of us. No matter where we were, we seemed to gravitate toward each other, always within reach, as if distance between us was impossible. But slowly, so slowly I barely noticed, something began to change. The conversations that used to pour out of us effortlessly started to feel forced and short. The gentle way she used to speak to me was replaced by something distant, and all the little things she did, the way her fingers would slide into mine without a thought, the way she would lay her head on my shoulder when she was tired, those vanished as though they had never existed. The nights that were once filled with warmth and closeness turned cold and unfamiliar. She would lie in bed with her back to me, a wall of silence I couldn't get past. Weeks went by without the simplest form of affection, not even a kiss that felt real. I kept telling myself this was normal, that maybe this was what long-term love looked like, that maybe routines and life's burdens had worn us down. But deep down, I was aching to hold on to what we had lost. So I decided I wouldn't give up. I wanted to fight for us, for everything we had been. One afternoon, I left work earlier than usual, determined to remind her of the love that had once been so strong. I stopped by the store and picked up everything I needed to cook her favorite meal, something I hadn't made in so long. I even grabbed a bottle of her favorite wine, telling myself this night would be special. When I got home, I set the table carefully, dimmed the lights, and let soft music play, hoping to recreate even a glimpse of what we used to share. When Aurora finally came through the door, she dropped her bag on the counter the way she always did, but when her eyes fell on the table, there was no smile, no flicker of emotion. Instead, she let out a sigh that filled the room like a heavy fog. "Elijah, you didn't have to do all this," she said, her voice carrying something cold that made my chest tighten. "I just wanted to do something nice for you," I replied, trying to force a smile that I didn't feel. She glanced around at everything I had put together, then looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite decipher. "I already ate," she said, her voice flat. I stared at her, blinking as if I hadn't heard right. "What?" "I had dinner with Bridget after work. I didn't know you were planning this." She didn't sit down. She didn't touch a single thing I had prepared. She just mumbled that she was tired and walked straight to the bedroom, leaving me sitting there alone, staring at the meal I had poured my heart into, feeling more foolish than ever. A few days later, I left work early again, not on purpose, but because I simply couldn't focus. My mind felt foggy, my chest heavy like I was carrying around a weight I couldn't set down. Aurora had been distant for months, but after that night, the distance between us felt like a vast, empty canyon. As I drove home, I thought about stopping to buy her flowers, one more effort to reach her, but as I slowed near a flower shop, something deep inside me told me not to bother. No bouquet was going to fix what was breaking. When I walked through the door, the house was eerily quiet. Normally, on her day off, I would have found her lounging in front of the TV or thumbing through her phone. But now, there was nothing. No sound, no movement. Her car was still parked outside, so I knew she was home. Confused, I headed down the hall. That's when I heard her voice, laughing, a sound I hadn't heard from her in what felt like forever. I crept closer, my pulse quickening, an uneasy feeling settling deep in my stomach before I even knew why. "I'm so bored, Bridget. You honestly have no idea," she said, her voice light and playful. "Elijah is just... I can't keep pretending." I stopped in my tracks, my body freezing as I pressed myself against the wall to stay hidden. "Even in bed, Bridget," she continued, her voice dropping to a secretive whisper. "I have to fake it every time." A bitter laugh escaped her lips, and on the other end, Bridget laughed too, like they were sharing some private joke. "It's honestly exhausting. I don't even want to sleep with him, but when I do, it's only so he won't start asking questions. God, I can't imagine living like this forever." My hands began to tremble, but I stayed rooted to the spot, every word cutting into me like a blade. "And you know that night Elijah made dinner for us?" "Yeah." "While he was playing house, I was with Lewis." She laughed again, louder this time, without an ounce of shame. "We went out for dinner, then got a room. It was incredible, Bridget. He actually knows how to make me feel good. unlike Elijah. Another burst of laughter filled the room, as if she had just told the world's best joke. I gripped the doorframe so hard my knuckles ached. Louis. His name felt like a punch to my gut. Yeah, we spent the night together. It was everything Elijah could never give me. My stomach churned, my body numb with shock, but I couldn't move. Part of me wanted to burst in and confront her, demand to know if it was true. But another part, one that was sharper, colder, knew I didn't need to ask. This wasn't a moment of anger or a passing confession. It was something deeper, something she had been hiding and now mocking without a second thought. I took a careful step back, doing my best not to make a sound. I didn't need to hear any more. She had already told me everything I never wanted to know. I don't know how long I stood there afterward. Maybe it was a minute, maybe an hour. My mind was a blank slate, my body shaking from something colder than ice. But beneath the shock, something else stirred. It was sharp, it was clear, and it was anger. I realized then that I wasn't some fool for her to toy with and laugh about behind closed doors. I wasn't going to keep playing along while she tore our life apart and made a mockery of everything we had. She thought I was blind, that I would never see past her lies. But she was wrong. She was about to realize just how mistaken she had been. I wasn't going to confront her, at least not yet. I had something better in mind. That night, while Aurora slept soundly beside me, I quietly reached for her phone. My hands were shaky as I unlocked the screen, my heartbeat thundering in my chest. I began scrolling through her conversation with Louis, and each message cut through me like a knife. "I can't stop thinking about last night," Louis had written. "Me neither." "I can't wait to see you again," she had replied. A sharp breath escaped me as I gripped the phone tighter, my knuckles white. But I kept going. There were more texts, more pictures, more plans, and then the final blow, a message confirming they were meeting again the next day. I stared at the screen, a storm of rage and heartbreak swirling in my mind. I had suspected. I had overheard enough to make me doubt her, but now, staring at undeniable evidence, the truth still hit harder than I ever imagined. And yet, it wasn't enough. I needed to witness it myself. The following morning I left as if heading to work, dressed in my usual suit and tie. But instead of going to the office, I parked my car just a block away from our house, close enough to see everything, but far enough to remain unseen. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly, I lost feeling in my fingers. Every tick of the clock felt like an eternity. Then, right at 11 a.m., Aurora stepped out the door. But she wasn't wearing her usual worn-out leggings and oversized hoodie, the lazy day outfit she always wore around me. From my car, I watched as she paused on the porch, adjusting her purse strap. No. Today, she was dressed to impress, tight jeans that hugged her hips, a blouse cut low enough to show off just enough, makeup perfectly done, and a spritz of perfume I hadn't smelled on her in months. She looked incredible. But not for me. Never for me. I swallowed the lump rising in my throat and quietly followed as she drove away. She pulled into a small shopping center parking lot, and for a fleeting second, I tried to convince myself maybe she was just running errands. That hope was crushed when Lewis's car pulled up moments later. He didn't hesitate, didn't look around to see if anyone was watching. The second he got out, he walked straight to Aurora and kissed her. In broad daylight, out in the open, like they had nothing to hide. I clenched my jaw, my nails digging painfully into my palm as I reached for my phone. I snapped photos, every kiss, every touch, every moment, capturing it all from every possible angle. Then, as if twisting the knife deeper, she smiled at him, a smile I hadn't seen from her in years, wide and genuine, and wrapped her arms around his neck, leaning into him like he was her whole world. She laughed at something he whispered, tossing her head back, looking carefree and in love. After a few minutes, They climbed back into their cars and drove off. I already knew where they were heading. I followed them, keeping my distance, my pulse pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Part of me wanted to turn the car around and erase what I'd seen, but I didn't. I watched them pull into a rundown motel on the outskirts of town. Nothing classy, nothing subtle, just cheap and easy. They didn't even bother hiding it. Louis got out first and walked around to open the door for her like some kind of gentleman. Aurora stepped out, adjusting her blouse and smoothing her hair. Then, hand in hand, they walked through the motel entrance together. I took more photos. Proof. Concrete, irrefutable proof. But instead of feeling victorious, something colder settled over me. A strange calm, the kind that comes right before everything explodes. I knew exactly how this was going to end. And it wasn't going to be in quiet whispers. She betrayed me in secret, but I was going to destroy the illusion she lived in front of everyone. I knew when. I knew how. 2 days later, we were at her parents' house for dinner. I played my role flawlessly, smiling when expected, nodding along to conversations, even chatting with her father about work like nothing had changed. But everything had. What Aurora didn't know was that I had already spoken to a lawyer the day before. Divorce proceedings were in motion. She laughed and chatted beside me, oblivious. Oblivious that this would be the last time she would ever sit next to me pretending to be my loving wife. Her parents had always embraced me like their own son, always telling Aurora how lucky she was to have me. Tonight, I was going to show them what kind of woman their daughter really was. After dinner, everyone moved into the living room. Aurora curled up next to me on the couch, leaning into me as though everything was perfect. She laughed at her mom's joke, sipping her wine, completely unaware that her perfect little life was seconds from crumbling. I took a deep breath, steady and sure. "There's something I need to show you all," I said, my voice calm and even. I pulled out my phone, connected it to the TV, and hit play. The first image appeared, Aurora and Louis locked in a kiss. Gasps echoed around the room. The warmth in the air evaporated, replaced with a suffocating, heavy silence. Aurora's body tensed beside me. Her mother covered her mouth in shock, her eyes wide and brimming with tears. Her father leaned forward, his face hard, his jaw clenched in rage. I let the silence stretch, letting them all fully absorb the betrayal unfolding on the screen. Then came the next image, Aurora and Louis walking into that grimy motel together. "What the hell is this?" her father demanded, his voice sharp and cutting through the thick tension like a blade. It wasn't just anger in his voice, it was betrayal, heartbreak, and disappointment. Aurora's wine glass slipped from her hand, crashing to the floor and shattering into pieces. And in that moment, as she sat frozen in horror, everyone in the room saw her for who she truly was. Her skin was pale as moonlight, her breath shaky as she turned to face me, eyes wide with disbelief. "Elijah," she began, but I cut her off, my voice sharp and cold. "Save it, Aurora. I know everything now, every lie, every time you betrayed me. You were with him that night, while I sat at home, waiting, preparing dinner for us. I know it all." Her mouth opened like she was about to speak, but nothing came out. The heavy silence was shattered when her father shoved his chair back, the legs scraping loudly against the hardwood floor. He stood up abruptly, his face burning with fury as he glared at her. "Tell me this isn't true," he growled. Aurora's throat moved as she swallowed hard, her eyes darting between me, her parents, and the muted TV in the background. There was nowhere left to hide. Her hands trembled in her lap, betraying the calm she tried to fake. "Dad, Answer me!" he barked, his voice echoing off the walls, causing her to shrink back like a child caught red-handed. She hesitated for a moment longer before forcing out a whisper. "Yes." Her father let out a harsh breath, his face twisting in disgust as he shook his head in disbelief. "I didn't raise you to be like this." Her mother sat stiffly on the couch, her eyes brimming with tears, the weight of her disappointment thicker than any accusation. "Mom, please," Aurora tried to say, but her mother turned her head away, silent, her eyes glassy. Then her father's voice cut through the air, sharp as a knife. "You destroyed your marriage for what? Some meaningless affair?" Aurora didn't move, her eyes glistening as tears started to fall. But me? I felt empty. No rage, no grief, just a hollow void where love used to be. She reached toward me, her hand shaking, her voice desperate, as though she still believed this could be fixed. "Elijah, please. Can we just talk? Alone?" I stepped back, my face expressionless. There's nothing left to say. Her lower lip trembled, her eyes begging me to reconsider. "Please." I turned to her parents, speaking calmly, though my heart felt like stone. "You've always treated me like family, and I'll always be grateful for that. But I can't stay with someone who treats me like I don't matter." Finally, I looked her in the eyes, delivering the words that ended it all. "Go home, Aurora. Pack your things. You're not sleeping under my roof tonight." A sob tore from her throat. "Elijah," I refused to look at her. I wouldn't give her that piece of me. She wasn't my burden to carry anymore. She broke down, pleading, crying, her usual pride and coldness stripped away, leaving nothing but desperation. But it didn't matter. I was finished. I grabbed my keys and walked out of her parents' house without a second glance. She didn't follow me. I knew she wouldn't. Driving home, I kept my pace slow. I wasn't in a hurry to return, not if there was a chance she was still there. When I was a few blocks away, I pulled over and sat in the car, staring blankly at the steering wheel, letting the truth of it all sink in. When I finally made it home and opened the door, there she was. Standing in the living room, eyes puffy and red from crying, her suitcase half packed at her feet like a silent witness to what we both knew was the end. "Elijah, please. We can work through this," she whispered, her voice barely audible. I didn't stop. I walked straight over, zipped the suitcase closed, and dragged it toward the door. I wouldn't even look at her. With a bitter laugh, I muttered, "Now you want to fix it? You only care because you got caught." She rushed after me, shaking her head wildly, tears running down her cheeks. "No, it's not like that. I'll end it with Louis. I promise." I finally turned to face her, but my eyes were empty. There was nothing left, no anger, no love, just cold finality. "It doesn't matter anymore," I said quietly. "The divorce papers are already filed." She gasped, her body swaying as though the words had knocked the wind out of her. She covered her mouth with trembling hands, her eyes wide, realizing she was losing everything. Her knees buckled, and she collapsed onto the couch, sobbing uncontrollably. Not the quiet tears of guilt, but deep, ragged cries that shook her whole body. I stood still, watching her, waiting to feel something, anything. But there was nothing. No sadness, no hate. Just a strange, quiet peace. I moved to the door, opened it wide, and turned back to her. "Goodbye, Aurora." She looked up at me, her face pale, her voice a fragile whisper. "Elijah." I stared at her, remembering the woman who had laughed behind my back, who rolled her eyes when I tried to love her, who gave herself to someone else while I fought to hold us together. I motioned toward the door. "Leave." Her shoulders sagged, her fight completely gone. For the first time, she looked truly broken. And without another word, she walked past me and out the door. That night, I sat alone in the living room. No arguments, no tension, just stillness. But for once, the silence didn't hurt. It felt calm. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting. Not waiting to be loved, not waiting to be respected, not waiting for someone to choose me. I had chosen myself, and in that choice, I had found freedom I never thought I would. This story has come to an end. No one deserves to be in a relationship where they are betrayed, lied to, and undervalued. Love is not just about beautiful moments. It's also about respect, honesty, and loyalty. If one person keeps fighting for the relationship while the other is secretly destroying it, that relationship has no future. It's important to know when to walk away, to keep your dignity, and to choose yourself. You should never hold on to someone who has already let you go in their heart. Value yourself, your feelings, and never let anyone trample on your love. Because sometimes the strongest step you can take is to leave and start living again, for yourself. What's your opinion? Share it in the comments, my friend. And if you like this story, check out other exciting videos on my channel. I'll say goodbye until the next video. See you. My name is Eric, and I learned in the most painful way that betrayal doesn't always wear a mask of malice. More often than not, it hides behind familiar eyes and a trusted smile. I built my life around loyalty and hard work, believing that if I gave everything I had, to my job, to my marriage, to the future I dreamed of, then eventually, the universe would respond in kind. For years, I truly believed it had. My career was thriving, I was married to a woman I adored, and the road ahead looked promising. I worked at one of the top firms in the financial world. While my co-workers shut their laptops and walked out at 5 sharp, I stayed behind, chasing ambition long into the night. I wasn't just working, I was shaping something lasting, something meaningful. After years of sacrifice, it felt like all that effort was finally about to pay off. The company's annual gala wasn't just a fancy evening, it was the event where futures were unveiled and careers took flight. Promotions weren't whispered in offices, they were declared front and center for all to witness. It was a night where reputations were cemented. And that year, I was a top contender for one of the most sought-after positions in the firm. It wasn't about the salary, not really. It was about acknowledgement, about proving that every all-nighter and skipped holiday had been worth it. Jolynn, my wife, the woman I had built my life with, was meant to be there to share that moment with me. We had been together for years. She wasn't just my partner. She was the one person I shared every corner of my life with. Never once had I doubted her devotion. Until that night. The venue was nothing short of breathtaking. Golden chandeliers bathed the room in a soft, warm glow, the tables dressed in elegance, crystal stemware, shining silver, and an air of quiet opulence. Ambition hung in the air like perfume. I walked in, proud, my hand resting lightly at Jolynn's waist. This was the night everything could change, and she was by my side, exactly where I believed she belonged. Jolynn had always been captivating, but that evening she was on another level. Her black dress fit like a second skin, her hair fell in soft, deliberate waves, and her smile seemed to light up every corner of the room. People noticed, they always did. When she spoke, conversations slowed. When she laughed, heads turned. For the first stretch of the evening, everything felt exactly right. I introduced her to my colleagues, and as usual, she charmed everyone she met. She had a gift for making people feel important, seen. But then, something subtle shifted. A barely perceptible change, so small at first, I brushed it off. It began with a glance, a moment of eye contact I almost didn't register. But then I saw where her attention landed, or more accurately, on whom. Luke, my boss, the man who had built the company from the ground up, charismatic, razor-sharp, effortlessly influential. He didn't just lead, he embodied the firm's success. And Jolynn, she wasn't just looking at him. She was watching him like the rest of the room had vanished. Not a glance, a stare, focused, intent. And then Luke looked back. A sly smirk crept across his face, measured, unmistakably aware. He recognized the look she gave him, and he didn't shy away from it. He welcomed it. Something inside me clenched. Jolynn turned her attention away just as quickly, laughing lightly at someone else's comment, her tone breezy and bright. But moments later, her gaze drifted right back to him. I exhaled slowly, reaching for my drink, trying to convince myself it meant nothing, that I was being paranoid. I forced myself to engage in the chatter around me, smiling where expected, nodding at the right beats. But something felt off. It was like the room had gone cold, like I was no longer part of the scene but watching from the outside. Then, without realizing when it happened, I saw them together, standing side by side, talking, laughing. Jolynn leaned in ever so slightly, her hand brushing his sleeve in a way that could have seemed harmless, except to me. I gripped my glass a little tighter. The sounds of the party, music, voices, clinking glasses, blurred into background noise. All I could see was them. Luke leaned in as she spoke, his grin wide and genuine. And then she did something that made my stomach knot. She tucked her hair behind her ear, a tiny, habitual movement, one I knew all too well. Jolynn only did that when she was feeling shy, or when she was flirting. My jaw clenched. And then, for the first time that evening, our eyes met. Her expression faltered for just a second, a flicker of something she hadn't intended to show. Guilt. It was there, as brief as a flash of lightning. But I caught it, a crack in the facade. And then, just like that, it was gone. She smiled at me, as if nothing had happened, as if I was imagining things. But I wasn't. She stayed close to Luke for the rest of the evening. I did my best to act unaffected, to keep up appearances, to stay present. But I couldn't stop glancing over. She laughed too hard at his jokes. Her hand kept finding its way back to his arm, her fingers resting there a moment too long. And Luke? He leaned into it. He wasn't ignoring her attention. He was encouraging it. His hand brushed the small of her back, lightly, but unmistakably intimate. I wanted so badly to believe I was wrong, that I was misreading the situation, but the sinking feeling in my gut said otherwise. Then, at some point, Jolynn reappeared beside me. Her touch on my arm was casual. "I have to take a call," she said, holding up her phone just enough for me to glimpse the screen. There was no name, just a number. Something didn't feel right. "Okay," I answered, careful to keep my voice steady. She smiled, kissed me on the cheek like everything was normal, and disappeared into the crowd. I watched her go, a strange dryness in my throat. 5 minutes passed. Luke vanished too. That's when the cold reality set in. I scanned the room, my eyes darting from the bar to the dance floor, then to the balcony beyond the glass doors. They weren't anywhere. That's when it struck me. I hadn't seen either of them for nearly 20 minutes. A tightness coiled in my chest. I placed my drink on a nearby table, hands balling into fists. I started moving, slipping between clusters of people, weaving through laughter, chatter, and thumping music. The sound faded as I stepped into a dimly lit hallway. Then, there it was. Faint laughter, muffled, concealed. I froze, heart hammering. A low whisper followed, then a moan, quiet, but clear. My body went rigid, a cold rush spreading through my veins. I followed the sound, steadying my breath. One of the doors down the corridor was ajar, a sliver of warm light bleeding into the hall. I pulled out my phone, pressed record, and pushed the door gently open. That's when I saw them. Jolynn, Luke. Her back pressed against the wall, his hands gripping her hips, her fingers tangled in the fabric of his suit. His lips trailed her neck. My stomach turned. They both froze, caught mid-motion. I didn't speak right away. The camera had already captured the scene. Then my voice cut through the air, calm and razor-sharp. "This is Jolynn, my wife, and Luke, my boss. And this is what betrayal looks like happening just down the hall from where I stood." Jolynn jumped back, eyes wide with panic. "Eric!" she stuttered, but I wasn't listening. Luke raised his hands, words fumbling from his lips. Wait, man, this isn't... He didn't finish. I slipped the phone into my pocket and drove my fist straight into his jaw. He stumbled backward, clutching his face in pain. I didn't give him time to recover. I grabbed his collar and dragged him through the hallway. I slammed the main doors open and shoved him into the middle of the party. The music and laughter still filled the room. But not for long. A hush spread like wildfire. Heads turned. Conversations stopped. I didn't hesitate. My voice rang out, cutting the silence in half. Want to know who this guy is? I looked around. He's the one sleeping with my wife. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Faces shifted. Shock, confusion, pity. Jolynn stood frozen in the doorway, color drained from her face. Luke wrestled free from my grip, his expression twisted in desperation. Eric! Jolynn's voice cracked. I met her gaze with ice in mine. It's over. I turned and walked away. No more words, nothing left to say. I didn't touch the radio as I drove. Just silence. The city lights blurred through the windshield, but my mind had never been clearer. My phone buzzed over and over. I didn't check it. I already knew who it was. When I pulled into the driveway, I just sat there for a moment, staring at the house I once called home. It looked the same, but it wasn't. Now, it was only a facade, hollow walls, empty vows. Inside, I moved like a guest. I found a suitcase and started packing whatever I needed. There was no chance I'd sleep here again, not in that bed. The phone kept buzzing. I finally looked at the screen. 12 missed calls, all from Jolynn. I could have shut it off, but I didn't. I let it ring, let her sit in that uncertainty, let the weight of her choices sink in. Just as I zipped the bag and reached for my keys, the front door slammed open. Jolynn stood in the doorway, breathless, streaks of mascara tracing down her cheeks. Her chest heaved with ragged sobs. Eric, please, just hear me out, she begged. I shook my head, a bitter laugh escaping me. There's nothing left to hear. I moved toward the door, but she caught my arm, her grip unsteady. It was a mistake, she said, voice breaking. It didn't mean anything. Don't throw us away over this. I turned to face her, eyes burning. A mistake? You humiliated me. In front of people I work with, friends. And now you want to talk about saving our marriage? Tears streamed down her face as she clung to my arm. I love you, she whispered. I pulled free, her touch like fire on my skin. You lost the right to say that, I said quietly. You had a choice. You made it. Her face crumpled. She reached out again, desperation in her every movement. Eric, please. No. My voice was low and final. We're done. I'm filing for divorce. The words struck her like a blow. She staggered, sobbing, broken. I didn't stay. No more pleading. No more apologies. I stepped out the door, her cries echoing behind me. That night, I drove to a hotel, checked in. The bed was stiff, the room bare. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, eyes wide open. Sleep never came. Only silence. And memories. The shock frozen on Jolynn's face in the lounge. The way Luke's smile disappeared the moment our eyes met. Her desperate voice trailing behind me as I walked away. None of it held meaning anymore. The following morning, I got up, stood under a hot stream of water until my thoughts cleared, dressed, and went straight to the highest-rated divorce lawyer I could find. Sitting across from him, my jaw locked tight and fingers interlaced, I didn't waver. I want a divorce, I said plainly, and I want to make sure she walks away with as little as the law allows. He nodded once and flipped open a blank legal pad. Leave it to me. With that process underway, my next move was clear, Luke. I walked into the office building with purpose, ignoring the casual hellos from colleagues as I headed straight to human resources. By the time the sun set, people would view me differently. I took a seat across from Peggy, head of HR, and slid my phone across her desk. "You'll want to watch this." I tapped play. Luke's image filled the screen, his arms wrapped around my wife. Peggy's posture stiffened as the footage unfolded. We said nothing while the clip ran. Jolynn leaned into him, her body language giving everything away. A brief kiss followed, casual and familiar, ending any doubt. When it stopped, Peggy drew in a long breath, her lips tight. "This is serious." "There's more," I told her. "Luke's been abusing his position here for months. People have whispered about it, but nobody wanted to be the first to step up. I'm stepping up." She didn't hesitate. An internal investigation began the same day. Then the stories came out. Accounts from women who had been misled, pressured, deceived by Luke's empty promises of promotions and influence. By the end of the week, he was finished, fired, his reputation shattered. 2 days later, the divorce papers were delivered to Jolynn. No warning, no phone call, just the same kind of cold finality she'd given me when she chose someone else. I handed her an envelope instead of a goodbye. And that's when the messages began. "Please don't do this. Eric, can we talk? I love you. I miss you." I read every one, but I never replied. A few days passed before I returned to the house, not out of nostalgia, but to collect a few personal things I hadn't grabbed before, items I didn't want to lose. As I pulled into the driveway, I noticed a sleek black car I didn't recognize parked out front. My hands clenched around the steering wheel. I got out slowly, instincts already firing. Inside, the house felt hollow. No TV, no voices, just thick, eerie silence, until I heard something. Faint noises from the hallway. My chest tightened. Then again, soft, unmistakable moans from the bedroom. I didn't stop. I walked straight down the hall and pushed open the door. There they were, Jolynn and Luke, twisted together in the bed that used to be ours. Time froze. Luke's face went pale, caught between speaking and saying nothing. Jolynn scrambled to grab the sheets, her eyes huge and panicked. "Eric," she whispered. But what I saw in her expression wasn't remorse, it was fear. She thought she'd gotten away with it, that I'd never know, that I'd keep living in the dark, still believing I mattered to her. For a long moment, no one moved. Then her face changed, hardened. "What are you doing here?" she snapped, irritation coloring her voice. I let out a short, joyless laugh, not because it was funny, because it was pathetic. That's what she had to say? No apology. No explanation. Just, "What are you doing here?" Like I was the intruder. I looked from her to Luke, then to the bed that no longer felt like anything of mine. I gave a slow shake of my head. "I made the right decision," I said softly, and turned away. No shouting, no dramatic outburst. I didn't need it. I had the clarity I came for. She had cried, she had begged, claimed she still loved me. And less than 2 days later, she invited him back, into our home, into that bed. That told me everything I needed to know. I closed the door behind me and never looked back. The weeks after that were all about starting fresh. I found a small apartment. No memories, no lies, just a blank page. Life got quieter, simpler. Work, gym, a drink here and there with friends who actually cared. Nothing chaotic, nothing fake. But it was mine. The divorce wrapped up quicker than expected. Jolynn didn't contest it. She kept the house and took a small part of my savings. I didn't fight it. Then, I heard something that nearly made me laugh. Luke dumped her. Didn't take long, maybe a couple months at most. He got what he came for. And when the novelty faded, he disappeared. Just like I always suspected he would. I can only imagine her face when it hit her, how she burned her life to the ground for someone who walked away like it meant nothing. Right on schedule, the final message came through. "Eric, please, can we talk?" There was a time when those words would have broken me, but not anymore. I stared at the screen. Then I erased the message, and I moved on, because not everything is worth saving. You spend your whole life trying for her, working, bringing money home, fulfilling her every whim. And then one day, you accidentally come home early and hear her laughing with her friends, calling you her personal ATM and a doormat on call. Everything you believed in shatters in a second, but instead of losing control, you decide to play by her rules, so that later you can take everything from her. The house, the money, the friends, even her pride. This isn't just revenge. It's a masterfully planned game of destruction. Hello, my friend. I'm so glad you stopped by my channel. If it's your first time here, don't forget to subscribe and like this video, as every like truly inspires me. Please tell me which city and country you watched this video from. Now, let's get started. That afternoon, I managed to clock out earlier than usual. No pressing deadlines, no urgent calls, just a quiet decision to head straight home. I thought it might be a nice change, a chance to surprise my wife, share a meal, maybe even enjoy an evening together for once. The moment I stepped inside, laughter rang through the house, boisterous, unfiltered, echoing from the living room. I paused just beyond view, curiosity keeping me still. Then, amidst the mirth, I heard her voice. "Ladies, let me introduce you to my very own personal ATM." More laughter erupted, unchecked and mocking. My breath hitched, my grip tightening around my keys. He caters to my every need, never questions a dime I spend, and wouldn't dare complain even if I bled him dry. Honestly, I could tell him to scrub the floors on his hands and knees, and he'd probably ask if I wanted anything else when he was done. The laughter swelled again, a cruel chorus of amusement. I remained frozen, torn between stepping in and staying put. But I needed to hear more. "Think I'm exaggerating?" she continued, a teasing edge in her tone. "Just last week, I casually mentioned how relaxing a weekend at that 5-star spa retreat would be. Didn't even ask outright, just floated the idea over dinner. And what do you know? By morning, the reservation was made. He's so easy to manipulate, I don't even have to try." She spoke with a casual arrogance, delighting in her own cunning. Her friends chimed in, one of them sighing, "You're so lucky. I wish my husband was that easy to control." "Luck?" My wife scoffed. "It's not luck. It's about knowing how to pull the strings, make them feel guilty, play sweet when necessary, maybe shed a few tears now and then. Works like a charm." Glasses clinked together, likely in a toast to her expertise in deception. I leaned against the wall, staring at the floor as the weight of her words settled in. Every thoughtful gesture, every sacrifice, every effort I had made to ensure her happiness, it had all been a joke to her. And worse, she had an audience that knew exactly how she saw me. I wasn't a husband in their eyes. I was a paycheck, a puppet. Something shifted inside me. I wouldn't barge in. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction of a reaction. Instead, I turned on my heel and walked right back out. Sitting in my car, I gripped the steering wheel, my mind racing. Every moment I had devoted to her, every compromise I had made, it had all been for nothing. But now, I had a choice. Not one driven by anger or heartbreak, but a real, deliberate decision that would change everything. One thing was clear. I was done being her fool. I didn't return that night. Instead, I drove aimlessly, letting the reality of it all sink in. Confronting her in some dramatic showdown would be useless. She didn't respect me. She never had. If I wanted out, I had to be smart. I checked into a budget motel, sat on the edge of the bed, and pulled out my phone. No more emotions. Those didn't matter anymore. What I needed was a plan. First, I had to gather proof. I couldn't afford to leave myself defenseless. I started recording everything, every insult, every moment of manipulation, every time she treated me like an accessory rather than a partner. I had never thought to document it before, but now, every incriminating remark was safely stored. Next, I sought legal advice. Not just any lawyer. I needed someone specialized in divorce and financial protection. I spent hours combing through reviews, checking credentials. By dawn, I had an appointment scheduled. She wouldn't see it coming. Then came the finances. Logging into our accounts, I combed through the transactions. The evidence was glaring: reckless spending, unnecessary luxuries, indulgences funded entirely by me. And I had let it happen. But not anymore. I opened a separate account in my name alone, discreetly transferring small amounts, nothing that would raise immediate suspicion. I also started canceling our joint credit cards, one by one, ensuring that the next time she attempted another extravagant purchase, she'd be met with an unpleasant surprise. The hardest part was keeping up the illusion that nothing had changed. When I finally stepped back into the house, she barely looked up from her phone. "Where were you?" she asked, not even feigning interest. "Work ran late," I lied without hesitation. She didn't press for details. She didn't even care. But soon enough, she would. She never questioned it, not even once. As long as the money kept flowing without interruption, my whereabouts and actions were of no consequence to her. That apathy worked perfectly in my favor. Over the next several weeks, I played my role to perfection, smiling on cue, nodding along to her endless self-centered demands, and upholding the illusion of the dutiful husband she believed me to be. But behind closed doors, I was dismantling every pillar of her comfortable existence. I systematically erased her from my financial world, altering passwords and revoking her access to my accounts. My insurance policies. The beneficiaries were quietly updated. Any asset that could legally be stripped from her control was swiftly removed without raising suspicion. Meanwhile, I began scouting for a new place, something small, something entirely mine. My lawyer was methodical. Together, we drafted divorce papers designed to ensure she walked away with precisely what she had entered the marriage with: nothing. The moment I signed them, an immense weight lifted, one I hadn't even realized I had been carrying. Now, all that remained was selecting the perfect moment to unveil my final move. And I already knew exactly when it would be. That opportunity came sooner than expected. Barely a week after finalizing my plan, she hosted yet another evening with her friends. The same group, the same setting, the same insincere smiles. As always, I played along, greeting them, pouring drinks, maintaining the illusion of the oblivious husband they all dismissed as insignificant. To them, I was merely part of the background, a piece of furniture in my own home. That suited me just fine. Tonight, they were in for a surprise. Midway through dinner, she followed her predictable routine. "We should plan another girls' trip," she mused, swirling the wine in her glass. "Something extravagant this time." One of her friends gasped in delight. "Oh my God, yes! Italy? Or Greece?" another suggested excitedly. Her lips curled into a smirk. "Why not both? After all, I have my personal sponsor right here." She made a lazy gesture in my direction, not even bothering to look at me. That was my cue. Without a word, I reached into my pocket, pulled out an envelope, and placed it in front of her. She frowned. "What's this?" "Open it," I said, leaning back in my chair with deliberate ease. With a flick of her manicured nail, she broke the seal and unfolded the papers inside. At first, confusion flickered across her face as she skimmed the first page. Then her eyes darted to the second, then the third. The mood in the room shifted. A heavy silence descended. Her friends exchanged uncertain glances, waiting for her reaction. When it came, it was sharp and raw. "What the hell is this?" "Divorce papers." My voice was calm as I took a measured sip from my glass. She blinked as though I had spoken in an unfamiliar language. "You're joking." "No," I replied, setting my drink down with finality. "I'm done. You don't need a sponsor anymore. You're on your own." A ripple of discomfort passed through the group. Some of her friends shifted awkwardly, while others discreetly covered their mouths, stifling reactions. The laughter that had filled the air moments before was gone. She flipped through the documents with trembling fingers, her eyes darting over the details that confirmed the inevitable. She had been cut off completely. Locked accounts, untouchable assets, not a single cent left for her to claim. The color drained from her face. You can't do this," she stammered, her voice rising. "You can't just—" "I already have," I interrupted, my tone unwavering. Silence. She turned to her friends for support, but something had shifted. No one was leaping to her defense. In fact, a few seemed to be relishing the spectacle. A smirk here, a slow sip of wine there. Her so-called allies were enjoying the drama. Her gaze snapped back to me, realization dawning. "You knew," she whispered. "You knew all along, and I planned," I corrected her. "Just like you did every time you used me. Just like you bragged about it to them." I gestured around the table. I listened. I learned. Her mouth opened, then closed. Words failed her. A soft chuckle escaped from one of her friends, and another took a leisurely sip of wine, savoring the unraveling of the moment. And then she understood. She wasn't just losing me, she was losing everything. I pushed my chair back, rose to my feet, and adjusted my jacket. "This doormat is done," I said. "Enjoy your dinner." Without another glance, I turned and walked away. I didn't wait for her outburst, didn't look back to see the devastation on her face. It didn't matter. My role in her life had ended. Most of my belongings were already at my new place, and soon the locks on this house would be changed. The financial cords that once bound us had been severed. No more access to my accounts, no credit cards, no safety net. The next day, the calls started. Furious, desperate voicemails packed with demands and accusations flooded my phone. I ignored them all. Then came the texts, veiled threats, pitiful guilt-tripping, every manipulative trick she had ever relied on. None of it worked this time. And then, finally, silence. That was when reality truly hit her. The moment her credit card was declined. The moment she checked our joint account and found it empty. The moment she called the bank only to be informed she had no authority there anymore. The world she had so carefully built on my dime was collapsing beneath her. She turned to her friends, expecting sympathy. She found none. Rather than finding the support she had anticipated, she was met with indifference. The same women who had once cheered her on, laughed beside her, and encouraged her to take advantage of me were suddenly absent. Worse still, they seemed to relish her downfall. Proof of their betrayal reached me soon after. Screenshots of their private conversations, handed to me by someone who clearly wanted me to see what was being said. She really thought she could keep living off him indefinitely. Too hilarious. She got exactly what she deserved. Treated him like dirt, and now she's facing the consequences. If you're going to drain a guy dry, at least don't humiliate him in the process. They had never been true friends. They had simply been waiting for the moment she would stumble, eager to bask in her misfortune. And now that the moment had come, they observed with cruel amusement. In desperation, she reached out to them one by one. Some didn't bother replying at all. Others offered empty words. "I've just got a lot on my plate right now. I need to focus on myself. I hope things get better for you." Hollow excuses, meaningless pleasantries. She was entirely alone. I never saw her in person again, but I heard enough. She had to scale back everything, her lifestyle, her aspirations, even her home. The house she once flaunted was gone. She couldn't afford it. The extravagant vacations, the impulsive shopping sprees, the effortless indulgence, all vanished. At some point, she attempted to reach out to me. The messages came sporadically at first, apologies, explanations, then desperation. "I messed up. I see that now. Can we talk? I don't need money. I just need to understand why you did this. Please. I'm struggling." I read them, and I ignored them. She had made it abundantly clear what I had been to her. Nothing more than a convenience, a resource to be exploited. And now that resource was gone. Ignoring her pleas wasn't difficult. I had emotionally detached long before I handed her the divorce papers. What surprised me was how effortlessly I adjusted to my new reality. For the first time in years, I wasn't constantly exhausted, wasn't carrying the burden of providing for someone who saw me as nothing more than an ATM. I woke up in a space that was my own, a modest yet modern apartment, not excessive, but mine. No furniture picked by someone else, no unnecessary extravagance filling the rooms. Just simplicity, just peace. At first, the silence felt unfamiliar. Not because I missed her, I didn't, but because I had spent so long catering to someone else's expectations that I had forgotten what it was like to live solely for myself. No more checking my bank account with a sinking feeling, wondering how much she had burned through that week. No more unexplained charges for designer bags or overpriced spa treatments. No more relentless demands. For the first time in years, I was in control. I threw myself into my work, not as a distraction, but because I genuinely wanted to. Without the constant tension of walking on eggshells, my focus sharpened. I tackled long-neglected projects, invested in things that actually mattered to me. As my finances stabilized, I permitted myself to enjoy the things I had once sacrificed. I returned to the gym, no longer skipping sessions because I was too drained from managing her chaos. I reconnected with real friends, the ones I had lost touch with because my marriage had consumed so much of my life. One of them, an old college buddy, laughed when I mentioned the divorce. "I always wondered why you stayed," he said. "It was like watching someone try to fill a glass with a hole at the bottom." That line stuck with me, because it was true. I had spent years pouring everything into an endless void. So, I took a trip. Nothing extravagant, just a quiet weekend at a lakeside cabin. No schedules, no obligations, just space to breathe. It was something I had always wanted to do but never had, because she would have dismissed it as too simple, too cheap. But now, I didn't need anyone's approval. Every so often, I'd hear about her. She had moved in with a relative, barely clinging to a fraction of the life she had once paraded. The same people who had admired her lavish spending had long since latched onto someone with deeper pockets. But none of that was my concern anymore. I didn't feel resentment. I didn't feel anger. I just felt free. Life carried on. And so did I. Weeks turned into months, and she became little more than a distant memory. I had built a life entirely my own, surrounded by people who genuinely cared, devoting my time to things that truly fulfilled me. No longer wasting money and energy indulging someone else's insatiable appetite for more. But life has a way of bringing things full circle. One evening, I was sitting in a cafe near my office, catching up on emails while waiting for my coffee. Just another ordinary day, until I heard it. Her voice. I didn't look up right away, but I felt it before I saw her. That familiar tension, that carefully measured sweetness in her tone, as if she had rehearsed every word before speaking. When I finally lifted my eyes, there she was, lingering by the counter, hesitant, unsure of whether to approach. She looked different. The designer bags, the expensive jewelry, the meticulously styled hair. Gone. She wasn't in rags, but she wasn't the woman she once pretended to be. No artificial glow of wealth, no smug confidence, just someone who had been humbled by reality. And then, she walked toward me. She welcomed me with a subdued smile, the kind reserved for a familiar face you haven't seen in years. I acknowledged her with a slight tilt of my head, but said nothing. If she assumed this conversation would be easy, she was in for a rude awakening. "I've thought about reaching out so many times," she started, shifting uneasily in her seat. "But I wasn't sure if you'd even want to hear from me." I let the silence stretch, watching her grow more unsettled as she waited for some sign of encouragement. None came. She released a slow breath, as though summoning the nerve to continue. "I just want to say, I was wrong. About everything." I raised an eyebrow, feigning intrigue. "Everything?" Her lips pressed together before she nodded. I treated you horribly. I never really valued what I had until it was gone. A short breath escaped me, not quite laughter, more of an instinctive reaction. Took you long enough. She swallowed hard. I lost it all. The house, the lifestyle, the so-called friends I thought I could count on. A bitter smile flickered across her face. They vanished the moment things got tough. I was naive to believe any of it meant something. I remained silent. What was there to say? I had seen the truth long before she ever did. She hesitated, then inhaled deeply, bracing herself. I miss you, she admitted. I miss what we had. I let her words hang in the air before responding. There was never a we. There was you, and then there was me, the guy paying for everything while you laughed at my expense. She flinched, clearly unprepared for my directness. Maybe she had convinced herself that time had dulled the edges, that I'd be willing to rewrite history and pretend it hadn't been as awful as it was. But I wasn't that person anymore. She reached forward hesitantly, an unspoken plea in the gesture, but I withdrew before she could make contact. I just thought, maybe we could talk, maybe find a way to start fresh. I shook my head. There's nothing left to begin. Her eyes shimmered, tears threatening to fall, but I felt nothing. Whether her emotions were real or just another act, I couldn't say, and I didn't care. She had spent years making me feel like an afterthought, an accessory in her carefully curated life, convinced I would always be there to clean up the mess, to play the role she had assigned me. She had been mistaken. I picked up my coffee, rose to my feet, and spared her one final glance. Take care, I said. Then, just like before, I turned and walked away. This story has come to an end. If someone only values you for what you give, that's not love, that's exploitation. True relationships are built on respect and care, not manipulation and greed. Sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is walk away and choose yourself. Never let anyone treat you as less than you are. You deserve to be valued, not used. If this story inspired you, leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments. Stay strong and remember your worth. What's your opinion? Share it in the comments, my friend. And if you like this story, check out other exciting videos on my channel. I'll say goodbye until the next video. See you.